All right, hello everybody, and welcome to the Dedicated Show. We are coming at you live today with a great panel. We're going to take you back to the future with machine learning. So it's going to be a really fun panel. We've got Umar Lee, consultant at Pomerol Partners, Graeme Russell, senior consultant at Pomerol Partners, Eric Wilson, who's the director of thought leadership at the Institute of Business Forecasting and Planning, and Nate Olmstead, who's the senior vice president of data analytics at Northrim Bank. Today, we're talking about financial banking problems where AI and machine learning can actually assist and solve some of those problems. We'll cover some machine learning trends that they're seeing in the business, specifically in demand planning and business forecasting. And then we're going to talk to you about maybe some signs that your company is ready for machine learning. Now, as you're joining the live session, I love interacting with the live audience here. So make sure that you're commenting and asking questions. We're going to take as many comments and questions throughout the show as possible. So don't save them for the end. We're the show that takes them during the event. I see some folks are already in the audience. I see Guillermo's here from Argentina. Colette, hello. Colette's from Pomerol Partners as well, and she'll be in the audience helping out if anyone needs links or anything else. Hello, hello. I see more folks are joining us. Svetlana, good to see you here. As you're joining, I want to ask you a question. It's a very easy sort of ABC question, and just let us know where you are personally on your machine learning journey. So would you consider yourself to be a beginner, intermediate level, or expert level, advanced, right? So pick one of those three, type it into the chat. That will really help us direct the conversation and really get an understanding of who's in the audience and what topics we can cover, because we can take this into a lot of different directions. As you do that, I'm going to go ahead and bring up all of our panelists, and then we're going to go do a round of introductions. So we've got Umar Ali, hello, Eric Wilson, Nate Olmstead, and Graeme Russell. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Thank you all for being here. So excited. I've been waiting for this session for, at least 2 months now. So I'm excited we're finally here.
All right. Excited to be here.
Excited awesome. Woo! Love the energy. Okay. For some of you, I know it's super early in the morning, so thanks for making the time. Quick reminder to the audience, the question is, where are you in your machine learning journey, beginner, intermediate, or expert level? Now, as they type in those answers, we're going to go around the room here and do some introductions. So, Umar, let's go ahead and start with you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Umar Ali. I'm a data consultant at Pomerol Partners, and primarily what Pomerol Partners is we're a data consultancy, and we simplify data to help businesses grow. And I primarily work with Graeme in the machine learning sector to help companies achieve machine learning and automation.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you for that. Moving on over to Eric Wilson.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm excited about this as well, even though I didn't show it up front. My name is Eric Wilson. I'm the Director of Thought Leadership for the Institute of Business Forecasting, IBF. I came to the school after about 25 years of practitioner experience and director experience with various companies, various industries. IBF, if you're not familiar with it, it's actually a membership organization about fostering the growth of business forecasting, predictive analytics, S&OP, and related fields. Vast body of knowledge. I do a podcast myself every couple of weeks, comes out on YouTube, IBF on demand. We do conferences, journals, things of that sort. So excited to be part of this.
Awesome. Excited to have you part of this. And let's go over to Graeme Russell.
Hi, I'm Graeme Russell, Senior Consultant at Pomerol Partners, where I help clients identify and realize their AI goals. I have a background in physics, contributing to climate modeling research and medical imaging techniques.
Amazing. All right. And let's go on over to Nate.
Thanks, Kate. I'm Nate Olmstead, Senior Vice President of Data Analytics at Northrim Bank. We are headquartered here in the very, very, very far northwest of Anchorage, Alaska. We're a $2.5 billion commercially focused community bank that is publicly traded to boot. So before everybody asks, we do have high-speed internet. We don't live in igloos, at least not all of us. I have a fairly normal house. And we do have DeLoreans and all sorts of wildlife that we run into on a very regular basis. So, yes.
Well, funny you should mention that, Nate. So we have a special treat for the audience. So Nate is a runner, and he wanted to show off some of the things he sees commonly on his runs. So This is tell us about this, Nate. What are we looking at?
That is an Alaskan traffic jam, otherwise known as a bull moose. And even though they look really friendly, like a big horse, they're not. And so you try to not run into them. And last week I ran into a few more on a run and just kind of had to get creative to get them off the path. So, and vehicles, running on foot, hiking, yeah, you just never know what you're going to get. So Alaska's
did you actually take the picture here with your phone or whatever?
Yes, I did.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Okay, I would try to pet this thing. That's my
No, don't do that.
So,
put that on the no list.
and tell us about this cool thing right here.
Yeah, my neighbor, as it turns out, loves DeLoreans, and he bought a brand new off the line, a 1983. And I'm not very knowledgeable on these, but he just absolutely loves the thing. It's only got about 5,000 miles on it, and he just pretty much stares at it day in and day out, I'm guessing. But he was kind enough to let me get a photograph in it over the weekend, kind of leading into the Back to the Future with machine learning here.
So you went to your neighbor and you're like, I need a photo for my LinkedIn Live session, or?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'll have to barter with some snow blowing services here, but yeah, he was very amenable and very agreeable. So yes.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just looking into the comments here just to get a sense of where folks are standing in terms of their machine learning journeys. We've got intermediate, we've got beginner. So far, we're leaning towards beginner. Intermediate, beginner, intermediate. So nothing too advanced, where we weren't planning to cover anything too advanced here. So they're all coming in right now. And it looks like for the most part, it's a mix of beginner to intermediate level. So that's where we'll keep the conversation. And I think a great place to get started is with Eric, as the director of thought leadership at IBF. And I'm going to learn what it stands for. Hold on. Institute of Business Forecasting and Planning. It's a long one.
We'll take the acronym, IBF. That's fine. IBF.org. So, just IBF's fine.
Well, yeah, I want people to know what IBF is, because when I first saw it, I didn't, and I had to, look into that. But you probably see a lot there. So I want to know, how does machine learning, AI, and any other technologies, how are they actually changing the demand for forecasting? Or changing demand forecasting? Yeah,
we're definitely seeing some big changes, especially over the last couple years. We've been talking about, external data points, looking at new ways of modeling. We've been talking about that for a decade now. And really, because of COVID, we've seen kind of this increase in usage and people starting to look at some of these things, not only because it's a sexy thing and, machine learning and AI, but they're seeing needs for it in demand planning. Being able to find other types of data other than just historic data sets of their own sales to be able to predict what's going to happen in future. Trying to find a leading indicator that's going to tell you more about what's going to happen going forward. Finding different ways to model to add some probabilities to understand what if this occurs and what if that occurs. They're bringing all those things into the demand planning. So we're really seeing kind of an evolution, or I actually call it a revolution in the demand planning field with a lot of these technologies and data and capabilities that we're seeing businesses have now.
Yeah, and you mentioned businesses. Which industries would you say are most heavily impacted by this?
It's really across the board. I mean, businesses where every business decision is based on a forward-looking projection, a forecast. So the better we can make a prediction and forecast, the better we can make business decisions. So business decisions are across the board in all industries. Which one we're seeing the biggest impact? Well, we've seen in predictive analytics, a lot of the machine learning probabilities play into where there's risk involved. Obviously, banking, there's a lot of risk involved there. Insurance industry, a lot of risk involved there. You see it in pharma, where there's obviously you need to be precise. There's risks involved there because of the lead times and a lot of what's doing. So you're seeing where there's more risk, the decisions become more important. There you're going to look at more types of analytics, predictive analytics, machine learning, things of that sort.
Right. Absolutely. And you mentioned banking. We got one person there in banking. Somewhere. Hold on. It's reversed. So. Any thoughts on that, Nate?
No, I mean, Eric's spot on. And I know, like, especially when we talk about risk, and my mind immediately goes to fraud. And it's a constantly moving target there. And we've all seen various cases of fraud in the news. I actually just saw an article the other day about, it was about 1.7 billion was lost last year. And it was with retirement fraud, primarily targeting people who are approaching or in retirement age. And so, Eric is spot on with that. It's using that data in order to help predict and prevent and mitigate some of these risks as best as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so risk mitigation is one thing, but in banking, so the bank that you're currently working at is considered to be banked out, right? Or maybe that's all of Alaska is considered to be banked out, where you basically have to fight for the customer and fight to keep the customers, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about that and sort of tell us how you guys use machine learning and maybe other technologies to retain the customers that you have.
Absolutely. And Alaska is kind of a paradox. We have 700,000 residents, give or take, and half of them are in the area of Anchorage and, a few big population centers. But we also have folks who aren't even on the road system, who the villages, the cities are only accessible by a float plane in some instances. And so it's a pretty interesting thing, and getting customers and retaining customers is, of course, is important in any line of business. But, that's from us. We see very obvious behaviors that might lead up to a customer departure. But there are also those nuanced behaviors where the customer might not even know that they are at risk for departing at some point, but their behaviors might just be slowly leading up to something that does result in that. And then you have to throw in those outliers who may have perfectly normal behaviors that don't fit the model because they're in a remote area where they're utilizing the very absent or minimal banking services in their own unique fashion. So that has been a bit of a challenge. It's something that we are working on, and just trying to, Eric, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I wanted you to finish your thought because it's a great thought. I just thought, I remember this from elementary, raising your hand. So I just had a thought.
No, I think it's great. And you can consider the thought finished. I mean, it's a moving target, and it's a problem that we're working on. So I'll throw it to you, Eric.
No, you're talking about that customer loyalty. I mean, that's something companies are struggling with right now. It costs 5-6 times more for a new customer than it does to retain a current customer. And the big thing we saw through COVID, IBF does a lot of research, and one of the big things we're seeing through COVID is customer loyalty has dropped. People are willing to, because you had the anonymity sitting at home, you shop from home now. You don't have to get the brands you had before, and if they're out of stock, you're more apt to get something else off the shelves. So brand loyalty has dropped. We need to find ways to maintain and keep the customers we have. That's when it comes to understanding that consumer. And the only way you can really understand the consumer is not the historic sales data, it's consumer behaviors, intimate understanding of those consumers. That's where, machine learning, a lot of the resources that Pomerol Partners has, and being able to truly be able to understand and market towards the consumer. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned behaviors, and I wanted to sort of do a little follow-up there, Nate. You said there are some obvious behaviors, which are obviously obvious to you, but might not be obvious to the audience. So can you share a couple of those obvious behaviors that are signs and signals that a customer might be on their way out?
Yep, and some of them are customers who are just moving to another institution, which it can be a really hard thing to do, move banking services. I don't know if anybody's ever tried that. I know I have, and it's moving all the auto pays and direct deposits and everything else, and getting checks and debit cards and all that stuff. But we'll see some things just as obvious as somebody basically draining their account balance systematically over a period of time, or taking a stable account balance that's been average over a year and then just moving it down to like next to nothing, just to keep enough to keep the minimal to keep the account open. Those are some of the the obvious signs that our people can spot fairly readily. We have tools written around that in Click, for instance, that we publish to our branches so they can look at their customer base, reach out if they see there's a problem, and help to hopefully retain the customer, figure out what we can do better or what the customer needs. So there some obvious ones like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So Nate, you're asking what the customer needs or anything like that. Do you ever ask internally, like, why are we predicting this? Do you get any insights about why an AI model says this person should have this account, or maybe fraudulent or something like that.
Yeah, so that's kind of in line with like a next best offer, for instance. When we're newer, we're actually a fairly young bank, and the data analytics team that I head up is even younger yet. We were formed about 5 years ago, and so we are now, not to give a shameless plug to Pomerol here, but in partnership with Pomerol, working on some predictive models to help do some of the next best offer, where it might be a product the customer doesn't know we have, or doesn't know that they would just be a great fit for, that would actually help the customer out more than anything. And so building some of that, looking at the behaviors, combined with some of the obvious business rules around some of the products. Like we have a target base based on X, Y, and Z. And so those are really good. Like, we want to make sure those are in place. So even though somebody looks like a good fit, we need to know they're a good fit from a business perspective. So yes, that's an area that, we have embarked on and are really excited to expand on more.
Yeah, it's just yeah, go ahead.
It's just kind of a trend I've noticed is, of course, the accuracy, like Eric, the accuracy of a forecast is, of course, very important for a business. But I've seen a lot more people, I don't know, maybe if people concur, a lot more businesses asking, why are we forecasting this much? Or why is the best off at this? Is it because how frequently they're using this account? Is it because the weather's been bad in a forecasting instance? Things like that. Just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, getting to the why. That's what we need to do.
Get into the why. And I also want to touch on the how, right? So I think that you mentioned Click in terms of one of the tools that you are using at Northrim Bank. And I wanted to sort of position this question to Umar and Graeme. And from your consultancy standpoint, what are some of the tools that you're seeing as, that you'd consider interesting for machine learning, especially for the beginners in the audience?
Umar, do you want to start us, or shall I? We're tag teaming, so we're gonna have to.
Yeah. So are we talking indirectly to Click, or just in general what machine learning tools?
Both. Let's cover both. Click and any other machine learning tools that.
Yeah. So I mean, in Pomerol, we work a lot with Automl. We also use Python for TensorFlow, and then we have done some work within R. That's just to point out, Graeme, if you want to add on to anything else. Yeah.
So I think we've used some Azure machine learning software as well. I'd recommend that if you're a business who has got kind of quite a custom product they're trying to work on, and you have someone available in your business. Maybe you're one of those people who answered intermediate. So maybe you're used to scripting things, or you've got more familiarity with just the role of being a data scientist in general. But there are other things, like you mentioned, Umar. There's Click AutoML, which takes a lot of the heavy lifting out of the process. It's quite good. It's integrated into your BI tool. It can be used for a lot of different use cases. That's kind of bulked in with things like Data Robot, and maybe even Databricks as well. So yeah, there's lots of options out there depending on where you are and what you're trying to do.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to sort of dig a little deeper into that one. So Click's AutoML, you mentioned there are a couple of use cases. Is there a couple, maybe at least one use case that you guys can share that's more common than others?
So they're good at situations where you have labeled data, because clustering is one of their biggest use cases, and regression type of problems. So they're not doing time series. So Eric, don't pay attention to this, unfortunately. But they for next best offers, fraudulent detection, anomaly detection, they're going to be great for that, especially when it's important to have answering the question why. If you're at that stage, you've got that right there already in the Click, which is also like an analytics visualization software at the same time.
No, don't have to not listen to that one. I mean, because I'm familiar with it. Usually as past jobs I was at as well. So it's a great platform. And I wrote a whole book about going from time series to a external variables and trying to understand the why and going into that what if type scenario planning. I mean, I would have a question for a lot of the beginners out there, like a Christopher or Michael, some of the beginners out there that are demand planners that just live in time series world to create a demand planning signal. They don't know R and Python. Is your platform still something they can integrate and see different segments of their business differently, see different external data sources that they may not have looked at before? Can they do that with if that's the kind of role they're in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know there's a common problem with forecasting is, if you have a huge volume of different products, maybe different locations too, then maybe one of the first steps you have in a machine learning project is just to segment those data sets. So you're working with smaller things, being more precise about how and what you're forecasting. And that's something that Click AutoML can do. That's actually something I definitely recommend a tool like Data Robot for, because they can go the distance, the next step, and actually do the forecasting and attempt different models too. But yeah, you can absolutely turn a time series problem and improve it with non-time series tools as well. Yeah.
See, I could listen and tee up an easy question for you.
Excellent. Yeah.
There's hope for people there. Then if they don't want to learn Python and R, right, that they can use other tools that are available. And I think technology is improving to the point where it's getting easier and easier to leverage machine learning algorithms without having to really know how to code and program and all of that. Quick reminder to the audience that we will take questions as they come, but I do have questions for Nate. Let's move over to Nate. We haven't heard from Nate in a while. So you talk to us about retaining customers, and I know you touched on fraud detection, right? So let's quickly discuss some of the methods that how do you use machine learning to either prevent or detect fraud?
Yeah, so fraud's an interesting one because you have stuff that's either directly conducted by a fraudster, one of the account takeover type things, email takeover, or indirectly, through the customer themselves, where they don't realize that they're being defrauded of money in most cases. The one consistent element to it is changes to behavioral patterns. That's not something that customer would normally do, whether it's the customer or a fraudster doing that. And so we combat it with a variety of tools. We have commercial off-the-shelf software, which has some kind of analytics as a service or predictive as a service, where it's trying to spot some of those trends for us. And we also have some in-house custom tools. And I mentioned Click earlier, like that's kind of our epicenter for in-house things. And so we take and aggregate info from some of the commercial tools as well as our in-house custom. Because I think about fraud is there's a lot of like really known cases around the entire country, around the entire world. And then you have your kind of like localized and regionalized things. So Alaska permanent fund dividend, which I don't know if anybody on the call even knows what that is, but it has to do with oil royalties. And it's a huge fraud case here because we know it's a lot of money moving around. And so, and in a really weird trend recently too, as we talk machine learning and just spotting all these cases, I guess, and in the true Back to the Future theme here, we've seen an uptick in fraud using voice response units, which is basically telebanking. It's where you pick up the phone and you call in, you talk to the robot, and you give it commands like transfer money, and you push numbers on your keypad as opposed to just using the online banking app. That's something that is really difficult. We have all these different channels, and spotting the nuanced behaviors across, whether it's online banking for consumer, for business, telebanking, in person at, in a branch. There's so many different channels to do money nowadays. That's a natural case to fit in machine learning, where you're spotting those nuanced behaviors that are also going to be specific to the channel in a lot of cases. So, it's a moving target, to say the least, but that's all the more reason to be looking at letting the system do some of the heavy lifting for you, as opposed to having people staring at green bar paper reports type stuff and trying to spot that for themselves.
Yeah, because it's like fraud wasn't an issue before, right? Like fraud has always been an issue. It's getting more creative, and I think
yes, it is.
Companies have to get more creative to combat it. So I'm glad that there are methods available for at least mitigating. I mean, I've been a victim of credit card fraud and all that other stuff. It's just so annoying. It's almost as annoying as switching your banks, right? What you were talking about earlier.
Yes.
It's like, okay, oh wow, my Amazon card has to be updated because of this, and this one little fraud for like 10 cents that I had probably last year caused me hours of work of just updating my credit card for all these places. So glad you guys are mitigating it. Good luck. Good luck.
Thank you.
Any comments on fraud from the rest of the panel before we move on to some questions from the audience?
Fraud's bad.
Fraud's bad.
Fraud is
That's
bad.
great, Eric.
It's
a great
interesting.
addition.
Fraud is one of those things where if you're someone trying to if you're a bank trying to reduce fraud, I wonder if how much benefit there is doing it in-house with your own machine learning and modeling versus, going out to someone, people can probably do entire PhDs on improving fraudulent detection algorithms. And so there's one of those examples of, do I do it in-house versus outsourcing? So interesting.
And I
I've seen
think
a lot more of that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, and I think the answer is maybe a little bit of each. And we've seen some things that are, I have our kind of long-winded who we are, a publicly traded community bank that's commercially focused, right? And it's that specific combination has things that a larger consumer-oriented bank or credit union won't necessarily see. And so there are some niche things that even some of the commercial off-the-shelf software, which has some pretty good capabilities, doesn't always catch. And so that's where I do think there's a case for, having the PhDs out there who have written this stuff, and they've done a wonderful job of spotting it, but also having some expertise, some knowledge in-house to be able to combat some of those cases that, like the PFD fraud, we've not seen software out there that actually handles that case. And that is billions of dollars moving around institutions in Alaska all on like a couple days of the year. I mean, it's a huge deal, but it's so niche. It's one state that it applies to. And so there's a combination, I think, in there. But yeah, you make a great point, Graeme. It's some of the commercial stuff absolutely is a great way to start with. But I think also having that awareness internally, nothing will ever completely replace that, at least yet. Maybe the Terminator and Skynet will, but
Eric, I think you wanted to
I was
add
going to add,
something.
IBF, we've seen a lot of, used to you'd had legacy systems that try to do everything. And if you need a certain, job done, you'd hire that skill set in and you'd build it internally. What we're seeing now is a lot more, especially in the data science, looking at external, not necessarily, especially during COVID, because everything's a remote type of job now anyway, and utilizing services as a service or using external type of, really subject matter experts or niche players in certain fields to be able to provide those type of services. We're seeing a lot more of that, of companies going outside of their own four walls for data science, for data governance, for, some of this risk mitigation, some of this, that we're talking about here. They're looking, not necessarily building the capabilities, but looking what capabilities can we bring in from external.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna end this topic with fraud is bad, like Eric said. I love it. All right, moving on to some questions from the audience. Now, if you want to answer this one, just go for it. It's from Val. So the question is, how do you get curated data into your models reliably, and how much effort actually goes into data prep and data governance?
Yeah, the majority of it. The preparing a data, if onboarding a new client or just kind of trying to figure out what they can handle in terms of, or what benefits them with AI, the first thing we notice is there's a lot of work to be done first in terms of getting their data into one place, governing it so the right people have access to it, including data scientists at that stage, and getting it clean for use for modeling. Yeah, it's a big part of the barrier to ML.
Yeah, and like another thing that we notice is that when given so much data at a time, it's like it's hard to it's important to remove all of the fluff that's there and actually isolate what data is needed for the analysis or the model. And so that's something that also takes the time into like really doing your due diligence and looking through exactly what you need within the data, especially when a client hasn't really stepped into the field of machine learning or AI. There's just sometimes a lot of data there, and it's really good to take a deep dive into it and really understand what the client wants and how we can take that data and transform it into something that is beneficial to them.
Yeah, I think the number is 80%, right? Generally,
Mhm.
that's the number that's thrown out of how long it takes to prep and clean the data, and then you get to do the fun stuff if you get to that point of.
Yep.
Right. And so there's a lot in terms of some of the tools we already mentioned. The majority of what they're doing is that data prep step for you as much as possible. So, for example, Data Robot, they have a way of this is an example of things that someone who maybe isn't a data scientist doesn't think of as they go into a project is for forecasting, right? A business has a history of its transactions. It doesn't have a history of its lack of transactions. So when you're trying to forecast, hey, I want to see, when you're trying to forecast, every day for the next 30 days, well, your transaction history, you might be selling per product maybe only once every month at a location. And so you need to fill that in with zeros, and that can often be a troublesome task or something people don't think of as an extra step. But things like Data Robot now, that's a UI wizard that can just help you do stuff like that. And feature engineering too, of is the average over 30 days, is that a useful signal? Is the standard deviation useful? Things like that. There are a lot of things out there that can help you.
Okay, yeah, we've got some more technical questions coming in. So Mustafa's asking a two-part question. So part one is it better to integrate machine learning models built using Python with C++? And then sort of a follow-up question here on retraining models as they get updated. Is there a way to retrain in an automated fashion?
I can't say much about Python and C++. I would suspect that person, I can't see the chat, but I suspect they maybe said intermediate if they're
Oh
asking
yeah,
a question
probably.
like that. A lot of TensorFlow and popular packages on Python are actually built off of C++ and stuff in the back end. So I'd be surprised just how much they need to do there. It's probably doing something very custom. But I'd be curious to hear what that person's doing that they're asking that question.
See, Graham,
For
my
the second
response
piece,
is, yeah, no, go ahead, finish your.
so for the second piece though, actually, could I get a reminder of what that was?
Yes, absolutely. So when models are being changed, is there a way to retrain them in an automated fashion?
Yeah, so a lot of people, they kind of do like, depending on the use case, they do every month or every week or whatever, or just every time they need predictions. In my opinion, that's a bit over the top. What I would usually recommend is based on the accuracy of your predictions. So of course, I mean, that's going to be a very important thing to keep track of. So if your accuracy starts trailing off over time, that's your time to start retraining. If the inputs of your predictions have changed in the terms of population, if one product is suddenly doing a lot better and one's doing a lot worse in your forecast, maybe it's time to retrain your model. Things like that. I would try to retrain models based off of cues in the business, in the environment, rather than just whenever's convenient.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for that. And for that first part of the question, my response is probably it depends, because I think a lot of times the tool specific questions come in and it's like, well, it depends, what kind of data you're working with, what's your use case. So I guess for Mustafa, it depends on the actual situation. You can't say one is better than the other without having that full picture. I wanted to shift focus a little bit because we were gone through a pandemic. We're going through a pandemic. I'm not sure if there's an end or if this is the end of it, or if it has ended already. But either way, when we talk about business forecasting, and Eric, this one's for you, right? How did the pandemic change the way we actually forecast business, and maybe touch on how machine learning plays a role here? Because all forecasts went out the window, right? 2 years ago.
To a certain extent, yes.
Yeah.
Everything went out the window. People at least didn't trust the data they had and what was going to happen next. So yes, a lot of that went out the window, but the need for it still was there. And actually, what we've seen over the last year, the need has increased. There's a definite push towards being able to get a better understanding of what's going to happen in the future and better predictions. We've seen the industry as far as grow. So we've seen that. Some of the big changes we had during the pandemic, 2/3 of companies went to some external data source to try to explain what was going on internally, where before 70% of them operated off of pure time series type of models. 2/3 during it went to some external data point because they didn't trust what the data they had internally. We're seeing a lot more, you know, as far as shifts in types of models that they're using, being able to identify things quicker and becoming more reactive. The one thing I would caution in this as well, we're talking about lessons learned. There's still things to come. I mean, we have a recession, we have, you know, inflation, we have, you know, energy crisis. We have, you know, in Europe, they're going to have a horrible winter and energy issues in Europe they're going to have to deal with. So there's still issues we're going to have to plan for. All of that is risk. And we go back to one thing I said, the more risk you have, the more you need to start planning for that risk, understanding the components of that risk, understanding how consumers react to that risk. That's where we're trying to create. And that's what you know, a lot of this topic is about.
Right, right. And I think, we've all been impacted in one way or another by a pandemic. So I would love to hear from, Pomerol Partners and Northrim Bank as well in terms of how did you have to change your business to face this pandemic? Start with Nate because he looks the most.
I'll go first. We saw, and especially with the Paycheck Protection Program that was rapidly stood up, not once but twice after the pandemic started. We saw the business basically get turned on its head. Like, we completely shifted focus because it was important to keep businesses open, businesses afloat. And so it turned into, like, some of our roles changed, and my team got in extreme demand on reporting, on pipelining, on stuff that was basically, kind of the historical data reporting, but there was just more of an immediate need for it because it was this brand new program that nobody really knew what was going to happen, and it was just a big rush for the government. There was Small Business Administration funds. Mm-hmm. So we saw a massive change, and then of course following that we have to deal with the back reporting and stuff into the Small Business Administration. And just in time for everyone to take a nice deep breath, they did it again in early 2021. They kicked off the program again, and so we had learned quite a bit from that, but it still changed the business. Like, so we had a lot of nice tools, a lot of nice visibility into the process, a lot of really fun lessons learned from the first one. And so we were able to hit the second one, hit the ground running, but we saw tremendous changes, and not only from us internally as a business, but with our customers. And that one, it probably should have led in with that one because that was the more important piece of it. We saw customer impacts where they just, customers were either fighting to keep the doors open, or, where actually some customers thrived during it. They were either set up to continue business remotely, or their particular sector of business was just very, very aligned with a global pandemic. And so it kind of threw everything on its, turned everything on its head, kind of looking at Eric there from the forecasting, like, what we knew before, it no longer really pertained as much. So.
Yeah. Pomerol, you guys want to add? I know you've been thriving since I've just been watching it explode over the past year or so.
Yeah, because, as a consultancy, apart from constrained budgets, we didn't change, in the topic of AI, we didn't really change how we use it internally or anything like that. Forecasting is, something is a big thing for us, but we did see a lot of clients suddenly interested in forecasting. Because the classical statistics that they were using, exponential smoothing, ARIMA, things like that, very hard to tell it, hey, by the way, there's a pandemic happening, and try to figure that out as you go. And so I wonder, Eric, if you saw that too. Kind of, you said there was a revolution. I don't know if your take is that the pandemic helped spur that on.
Oh yeah, I mean, my book came out right before the pandemic, talking about predictive analytics for business forecasting. It was demand planning 2.0, where we're going, and no better timing because we've always seen this escalation of people adopting these type of what's next. Because the way we did it before got us to this point, but we need to start adding other types of capabilities, other data, other processes, looking at our data, segmenting our data differently, things of that sort. So yes, there was definitely, a people changing their viewpoint from an inside out viewpoint, from, hey, what's happening inside the business? What do we know? to an outside in, what's happening outside, bringing that information in, and really focusing on external factors. That was kind of the cultural shift that we saw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can echo that too. I mean, there were so many, with the large inflows and outflows of money as part of the Paycheck Protection Program. Like we started looking externally for factors on things like forecasting our liquidity. You've got these massive money movements going through, Small Business Administration and all the participating financial institutions in the country, and going to businesses. You might be propping yourself up for a really big fall if you're not monitoring liquidity and whatnot. But how do you actually monitor that? Like the federal regulations were changing almost daily, which is pretty unprecedented. There was here's new guidance, and you should do it this way and this way. And so yeah, we spent a good amount of time looking at external factors as opposed to just focusing on internally on our core data. So yeah, that's a really good point, to seeing that shift during the pandemic.
Yeah, just another follow-up for Eric on forecasting. It's important even when we're not in the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to touch on, is there a way we can measure the return on investment, the ROI of business forecasting? And if yes, how do we do it? And how do we use maybe machine learning to help?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, IBF research looking at a 15% improvement on your accuracy forecast is actually 2 to 3% to the bottom line with most organizations. That's real money. That's a 1 to 2% top line growth. Margin's going to be improving. You'll be able to improve your inventories because you can manage those better. So that's impacting your cash, also carrying costs, movement and freeing up capital there as well. So 15%, 2 to 3% to the bottom line. So there's real money there. How do you get there personally, as in your organization? How do you justify some of these ML projects or what you're going to do? You need to really be able to tie it to the savings of the organization. That's what I do. And what you can do is, even outside of just the end result, what we're talking about is probabilities. We're talking about correlations. We're talking about those type of relationships to different types of expediting costs, different types of inventory costs, different types of, lost sales, things you can measure simply looking at the probabilities and how that ties into types of prediction, types of risk management, types of, different types of projects that you can do from an NL perspective or any type of predictive analytics project. That's what you're kind of putting together to justify and really put a true ROI to some of these projects, and being able to bringing in a, Click or Pomerol Partners, you can justify those expenses that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
thank you for sharing that. Oh yeah, go ahead, Graeme.
I think that ties into the question about data governance and data prep, because often a business hasn't asked the question, how do I know if this is going to be worth the money for implementing AI? How do we know if our inventory or the rate of stockouts for this product is actually improving if we invest this much into our forecasting methods and using AI to do that? And so that's often a question we run into. How do I know if this user, if I'm doing next best predictions, how do I know if they took that prediction and it was a good prediction? And recording that and storing that data so that eventually when you are ready for AI or machine learning, you can actually test that theory and check that it's doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's especially important when you're bringing in those tools, technologies, right? Some of them are not cheap. Let's put it that way. And you've got to justify it. I think most of the time you can justify that expense because it does help save time, save money, and better forecast. As Eric mentioned, increases your revenue, your bottom line, and all that. I get confused between top and bottom line. I thought bottom line's expenses. Is that, or is that net
What's
income?
left over after top line growth, and you have your
Bottom
cost of
line,
goods, and then
got
your
it.
bottom line's what's left.
Bring me
over.
back to my
What you put in your
accounting
pocket.
days.
And
I
it's
actually studied this
2
in
to
college.
3% for a company. I mean, if you're looking at a $101 billion company, 2 to 3%.
Yeah,
That's some real money.
0.5%. That's some real money. So that's huge.
Yeah, I've been to some of the IBF or the IBF conference last year in New Orleans, and there was someone companies spending millions on improving their forecasts by a few percentage their accuracy, and that's worth the money just because of the volume of the revenue and so on.
Yep.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it was maybe Netflix or Amazon, one of these big ones. They also invested a lot of money into improving it just by a tiny bit, because for them
Mhm.
that tiny bit is going to result in just a lot of revenue. So when we did that survey early on for the audience, most of them said that they're sort of beginner, intermediate. But I wanted to follow up. This is more of a Pomerol question, but happy to hear from Eric and Nate as well. When do you think a company, like, how would they know if they're actually ready to use machine learning? I know we talked about some of the problems you can solve, like in forecasting and fraud detection, customer retention. But how do they know that they're ready for this?
They're on this live stream. Oh, sorry.
They're on the live stream is part one. Yes. What else?
I mean,
Right.
so
Well,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
on, Umar.
Okay. Yeah. So pretty much like the beauty of machine learning is that the prerequisite requirement isn't that high. So to say that you're ready for machine learning is kind of one that you have a problem in mind that you're trying to find a solution for, and you kind of just want to know what's the best route to get there. And by using machine learning, we can help like automate that process of whatever that problem might be, and also like forecast out. And you can see results that maybe you thought were impossible to really see. So I mean, it kind of relies on the situation and where the client stands. I guess like some basic requirements would be to one would be to have data, and also to understand what format probably your data is. Do you have structured data, unstructured data, and again kind of an angle of what you want to see out of that machine learning algorithm.
Yeah, Umar, I think that's a great point about just having a use case in mind. And that use case, you'd want it if and the question is you're first getting started with machine learning. So that use case should be very high impact for your business and very low effort in terms of implementing. So hopefully you do already have the data you need for it. Hopefully you already have the talent or the budget for it, because that's another problem we run into. And of course, right, that use case has to actually benefit not only the end users who are affected by that machine learning process, but it also has to, of course, benefit the business and the bottom line. And so having all that all kind of feeds together in this situation of, are you ready for it? Well, do you know what the problem is? Do you know what the, improving that problem looks like in terms of data? And then, how much of it does it cost to fix that?
Yeah, that's great. Just a quick follow-up question. So let's say I've got the problem. I know what problem I want to solve. I have the data. It's in a somewhat good format. I can't say it's great because I don't think any data is actually great out there. How do I get across the getting buy-in from the right people to actually get budget? Because I think that's probably the bigger hurdle. Everyone's got problems they want to solve, like their wish list, and they're like they at least have an idea of where the data is sitting. But then how do they get to that next step?
Yeah, so part of that, convincing people to get the budget and things like that depends on the culture of your company. So like another example of that resistance can be in terms of fear of failure. A lot of companies aren't maybe prepared just culturally, internally, to try something, see if it works. And if it doesn't, that's okay. We've learned and we can move on. So if you can pare down what you're suggesting your company do and really simplify it to something, minimum impact in terms of changing how people do operate day to day. It takes quick turnaround, things like that. Just really simplify down your offer so that fear of failure can be overcome.
Yeah, you mentioned fear of failure. Nate, did you want to say something? You looked.
Yeah, we've gone through this now twice, and I would say the two key pieces now to adopting and acquiring some of the new technology and justifying the expense, having a solid data strategy, like why are we doing this? What are we hoping to affect? And partnering with somebody who can get you moving. That was a key one. Even when we were purchasing our business intelligence solution, ClickSense mentioned earlier, our leadership didn't really know, like, why is this guy Nate here asking me for a big bucket of money to buy a solution? And so we partnered with Pomerol Partners to do a proof of concept, a low cost, high impact, solving a specific business problem, proving it out to our business like, hey, here's just one small example of what we can do. And we did the same thing with our first in-house predictive model, just getting that off the ground, leveraging a good partner and getting a good start to that, just to get it jumpstart. And it's a minimal expense in the grand scheme of things, but then it shows the leadership, hey, look, here's what this does, and here are the dividends that this will pay. So that those are key to getting off the ground, but also you still have to have that strategy in place underneath it all to really know where you are or what you're trying to do with it, as opposed to just buying a cool tool trying to proof of concept a cool tool. Why are we really doing this? So yeah,
we recommend to people you start small. You don't try to eat the whole elephant or moose in some cases. And then what you need to do is, if you're selling it up or selling it to, you need to talk the language whoever is going to be holding those purse strings. I mean, it's great to come and say, I'm going to do this, and all these exciting things that you want to do, but relatable to, are they going to create more visibility that they can have? Are you going to be able to save them money? Are you going to be able to do things more efficiently, save time? You're going to have to talk in languages they understand. And I have this problem as well, being, analytical. We seem to, want to talk in our world and all the bells and whistles it's going to do. And we need to be able to translate it to what it means to the business and them. So that's one of the things I would recommend as well.
Yeah, there was a question that came in earlier that I think you all just answered from Edison, talking about breaking the fear of machine learning uses. And I know we talked about getting buy-in from executives for, showing them the ROI for machine learning uses. But did any of you ever face someone in an organization that was like, no, machine learning, it's going to take my job, and I'm afraid of the black box and I don't understand it? Or like, how do we know that this customer is about to churn? Can you explain this machine learning model to me? Did you face any hesitancy in the sense of like fear of machine learning?
Yeah, I can't say. Oh, go on, Umar. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say that. I mean, it's not more of like the fear of, hey, this machine learning algorithm is about to take my job. It's more about the fear, since machine learning is like more relatively new. It might be something in the sense of like, hey, like, am I going to be able to understand this and interpret this and actually use this throughout the future of like whenever these consultants actually develop this for us? Can we manage this? Can we like still make sense of what we just paid for and continue on, right? So it was more something along like I've seen that kind of situation come up more often, but like I guess like that's like primarily where it's usually at.
Right, and there's some pitfalls there with interpreting it, but also letting the end user who's seeing that prediction do what they want with that information. So it's not prescriptive. It's not saying, okay, because the next best offer is this product, you have to sell this product. Kind of the way the business uses the prediction is important as well. You want to leave that person to be free of how they want to use the information as they see fit.
Got it. Yeah, and I think it's there's always going to be some fearful, hesitant people in organizations. We just have to bring them on that journey. And I like the high impact, low effort sort of approach that you can show them right away. This is what we did, and sort of the showing versus just telling. Even the term machine learning and AI scare some people. So thank you for that question, and thank you all for answering it. Time flies when you're having fun. We're like way over the scheduled time here, so I'm going to start wrapping up. Wanted to start off by thanking the panel, and thank you so much for taking the time, for taking all of my questions, the audience questions. Thank you so much for the audience for joining. One thing I like to end off with is, if people want to continue the conversation and learn more or follow you or find you somewhere on social media, let's go around and just talk about the best place to do that. So we'll start with Eric. Where can people find you?
Well, definitely find me on LinkedIn. I love to grow my network and connect with people and see what everybody's sharing. I do have a podcast, IBF on Demand. Wherever you get your podcast, you can check that out. You can find me at Eric at IBF.org if you want to contact me, or IBF.org. There's a wealth of content, a lot of it free for people in business forecasting, predictive analytics, sales and operations planning, related fields. So check that out as well.
And you have a book too, right?
Yeah,
Check
I
out
do have
the
a book, Predictive Analytics for Business Forecasting. I said it came
Yeah.
out a couple years ago, kind
Yeah.
of demand planning 2.0. I know Umar's, they're looking for it. Where's it at? Type situation. Right here. Yeah.
I have the book.
Oh, there it is. All right, awesome. Let's move on over to Nate. Where can people go to continue the conversation?
Yep, the easiest way is to hit me up on LinkedIn. If for some reason don't want to do that, then northrim.com. It's just with Northrim Bank, and you can find my contact info on there. And I'm not as cool as Eric. I don't have a book. I do have like a couple Stephen King books on my bookshelf back here, but yeah, that's but LinkedIn would be the easiest.
Well, I mean, Nate, you've got this.
No
right?
royalty.
I do have a moose. That's
Exactly.
right.
You got to and set in a DeLorean. Come on, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Let's move over to Umar. Where can people go to continue the conversation?
Yeah, you guys could just find me on LinkedIn, and I'm also not as cool as Eric because I don't have a book, but I have his book, so I guess that makes me like kind of as cool.
That makes you just as cool, Umar. So,
Yeah.
Graeme, I'm going to take a wild guess and say LinkedIn, but you go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions. You know, what is that big impact project I should be offering? Things like that. As well as on pomerolpartners.com. You'll be able to find, you know, we occasionally do articles on things that we're seeing, our thoughts on where the industries are going, projects that we've been on, things like that. So you might find inspiration there.
Yes, I love you guys post a lot of cool use cases and case studies on there. I'm always reading those. So thank you again. We've got David saying thank you to the panel. Feels that everyone's added value. I agree. I think this was great. You all took us back to the future with machine learning, whatever back to the future means. I mean, I watched the video, but like, are we in the future? Were we further in the future and came back to it? I don't know. Either way, you all did a great job, and I want to thank you so much for your time. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see everybody on LinkedIn online.
Don't forget, fraud's bad.
Fraud is bad.
So,
Thank you. Awesome. Bye.